It is already my pleasure and privilege to welcome back the dynamic, dauntless, defiant, and delightful Dani Katz. And of all the places we could commence our discussion today, I am just living, I'm not dying to know, I am living to know what it's like and how you are able to have such boundless energy when you're so busy running the world and controlling these wars and controlling the money supply and influencing the weather. So how do you find time for it all these days, Dani?
Well, luckily the Jewish cabal, like, we have a lot of help. We have a lot of minions. We have a lot of underlings in our underground bases. I appreciate you asking.
The Shabbos Goy are available to you beyond the Sabbath, but I'm still looking forward to your shirt coming out. And inside
Thank
jokes
you.
aside, Dani and her abundant stream of ideas to, I do use your moniker as a pattern interrupter. One of my favorite stories that you told, I think, on one of your solo casts, was going into some sort of maybe a chiropractor's office and the practitioners are all huddled up talking about, and you walk in and they say, oh, we were all just talking about Trump. Ellipsis, dead silence, waiting for you to jump in on the orange bashing. And I believe your reply was, oh, did you vote for him too?
Yeah.
And I just, that when I talked about this recently on a podcast as well, I've shifted my self-perception, as I'm constantly doing, away from being a people person, because people have often said, oh, you're such a people person, so easy, so extroverted, people person. And what I think people mean by that is that, and we'll look at both sides of this coin, that people feel comfortable around you, people are at ease around you, the vibes are generally good. And I realize that for the impact that I intend to make, both in person and otherwise, is that there will be a little bit more discomfiture for people. There will be a little bit more of that experience. And I've had it in my own much more personal, intimate life of when I dangle things out there, I watch people either freeze, disengage. Very rarely do I get a challenge, which is really what I would rather invite, just like to know that you're alive over there, So I'm curious if we can start there of all places as well. Do you have any, pretty consistent pattern interruptions when you're in person with people? And do you find that you are met with challenge, engagement, or is it total just avoidance and freezing from people?
What a great question. You always ask the best questions, like hands down. And of course, you start out the gate strong. I'm a big fan of pattern interrupting because of that automatic engaging. And I think because of the way that I present, and I'm sure a lot of us have this over the past few years, everyone just assumes that I'm under the same mind control that they are under. So I throw it out just to, like, draw attention to the fact that assumptions are being projected. I think most people don't know what to do with my pattern interrupts. And I think I am prone to pattern interruption, and it's not like I didn't vote this time around. Like, that was a full-on lie, but I just walked in to a lot of Trump bashing, and I thought it was pretty inappropriate because I'm walking into a professional office for the first time. So when Trump was elected the first time, and I was still living in Los Angeles, people it was like their stranger small talk was to bash Trump. And I thought that was just so odd because they didn't know me. So I would say, oh, he's my uncle. Do you know him? And they wouldn't say anything. It just kind of shuts up that kind of automatic thing. Or like these days when people are ripping on Trump, I'll go to like, well, I've never met him, but it sounds like you know him pretty well. So like, walk me through it.
Yeah.
I think most people, it just like shuts them up. When it was, hard lockdown and I never wore a mask or, as much as possible, there were some moments where like the grocery stores wouldn't let anyone in. And then I would do the full face ninja mask with blackout goggles. But I learned through trial and error that when people would say something super mean about not wearing a mask, I would say, oh, I have a medical condition that prevents me from wearing a mask. Thank you for being a compassionate human. And it was the last sentence that stopped them in their tracks. And you could just see the like cognitive dissonance of like, because what I realized was the people who were doing this are order followers, right? They want to be told what to do. So then I started to learn, well, I could just tell them what to do. because they just want to be told what to do. So when I said, thank you for being a compassionate person, it was like they had this momentum around attacking me, but I just told them how they were supposed to behave, which was a nicer story. So I think usually it just skitzes people out and they don't know what to say.
Well, and that's a terrific recap of what that's like being across from you. And it's highly valuable because, I think of, if you'll forgive the Star Wars reference, but, for the myth that has played out for us, the whole idea of, Obi-Wan waving his hand, these aren't the droids you're looking for. And these aren't the droids I'm looking for. It is that idea of when you are able to, and schizo is a pretty savvy reference on your part. We've been rewatching The Power of Myth, Bill Moyers interviewing Joseph Campbell for PBS, and I think that's a must-watch for a lot of people, especially if you have any interest in your story. There's so much language around the hero's journey, but he talks about the experience of, I just remember this quote distinctly. He says, you're going to have some version of a schizophrenic crack-up if you are continually out of alignment with universal values of truth, freedom, health. I mean, I'm most privy to that on the health front because that's where I find the most opportunity to connect with people. And like usually my pattern interrupt with people when it comes to health. I mean, so many people in tennis, Dani, who ice everything that they hurt. Anytime something hurts, they ice it, they stretch it. And I usually say, how's that working for you? And because when people tell me, oh, I've had tennis elbow for 30 years and every time it flares up, Coach Tom, I ice it. And I say, and how long have you had it? And I say, do you see any connection? And that's where I see a valuable role as a guide, as a coach. I'll tap you for thinking of, because I was just having this conversation recently. There's probably nothing more offensive to most people than, and I've been on this arc for a couple years now, but I personally was so resistant to saying I'm a life coach when I was, I'm 31 now, but at 25, 26, like, is there anything more repulsive than people saying I'll be your life coach when I'm, 20 something? And, I'll kick it to you just for now. Can you think of any other better description than coach or guide? I mean, I do like the language of guide, that we're walking this path together. Maybe I'm a step or two ahead of you and I can show you some of the way. But as you know, so much of these journeys for healing, for growth are self-guided in the end, or for the long term. So a two-part question would be, do you know of any potent language upgrades for teacher, guide, coach, counselor, etc.? And is there any one sentence or one word that describes what you do, Dani? I mean, I still think of you as author, pattern interrupter with a hyphen, all that kind of stuff. But because I've always enjoyed that question of, like, if anyone asks me what I do, when I'm feeling fresh, I say, I fight ignorance every day. What do you do? And go with that. But I know what people mean. What do you do for a living? What do you do for work? And as you know, I remember we connected before around the Sovereign's Way, I believe, and how they talk about, job versus work. Job is what criminals do. So I'm going to pull a job. I'm going to do a job versus work, our life's work, God's work, anything like that. So when we think of our work, are you aware of any descriptive upgrades for those of us who are feeling called to lead from the front?
Another powerful, challenging question from Tom. I used to be self-conscious about calling myself a coach. And ultimately, I just worked through it and I'm fine with it at this point. I've played with guide, teacher, catalyst, but I feel like they're harder for people to connect with. And ultimately, it was like me getting over whatever my associations or hangups were around calling myself a coach because, athletes understand the value of a good coach. And I think, what I like about claiming the coach, even though I do tend to steer clear of like identity constructs around work or service, is that we can go anywhere. It's not like a therapist who has to do it a certain way. Like we can go above and beyond. We can suggest things. We can guide people to figure it out for themselves. Like we're not pinned into a corner per se. One of the coaches that I'm working with now has significantly fewer sun spins than I have. And I don't have any hangups about it because he's rocking the qualities that I'm ready to rock. And a lot of us, we just have different life experiences. So I have no issue, contracting, working with coaches who have fewer sunspins. And part of the work right now is he's been nudging me to get more clear on identity constructs, which is inviting me to look at the outdated resistance to identity constructs. And for me, that's around like kind of distorted attachments to freedom. So describing what I do, because I do so many things, I think it really depends on the context. Like, I'm a shit stirrer. I'm a word witch. I hold up a mirror to society. I'm a cultural critic. I'm an independent thinker. I am for sure a catalyst for growth and evolution. So I think at this point, it's just learning to know my audience, to know what's going to be the most useful for that exchange.
Certainly, and that does require that two-way stream, that exchange of where it can't just be all about me. When I'm in my best moments, I remind myself that I have nothing to say until I listen to you. I mean, sure, I can think of something to say, and I often have, and still, that feedback clues me into the uniqueness of this interaction, because it is a truly unique and singular interaction every time, and you are looking to meet any good coach. I remember my coaches from my high school strength and conditioning program who are, they were one of the first interviews I ever did on this podcast, because I think of them as bona fide coaches, high care factor, high integrity, at an all boys Jesuit school, where there's such a culture of support and burgeoning masculinity in a lot of good ways. Of course, some of it is stymied by other factors, and still those guys are beauties. And I remember them saying, meet people where they're at. And that does require that you get out of yourself to say, okay, not where would I like to lead you, or what is your past, or any projection. And that's been a hurdle for me teaching tennis to young kids is, since I'm rather sensitive to maybe how they got into, like, I have this young boy, he's probably about 10, and he likes to lead with his identity. I'm a vegetarian. I'm afraid of germs. I won't shake your hand. That kind of stuff. And I've already had 2 sessions with him, and thankfully, just in those 2, I'm able to step back and say, I'm just meeting him where he's at. And from one session to the other, we've hit a good stride. And that really is the energy exchange, where I'm on that path as well. Of it can't just be all about me. When I'm at my most apprehensive, literally just hitting balls back and forth with people, or if I'm second guessing what I'm saying, it shows. Just because I'm not in flow with my ability to communicate with people, and I've had a much better stretch lately of being in confidence, or just that it's more awareness. I think especially for athletes, that confidence can be fabricated, but the awareness to the ebb and flow. I do love that Novak Djokovic talks about that he does not subscribe to the of only positive thinking. Reject all the negative thoughts when you're in a match, because that's unrealistic. And so you flow with them, and you choose to move on with grace. And we have the freedom to do that. We absolutely have the freedom of choice. And to lean into that, I'm hopeful. I'm wondering if you're willing and able to say more about what you just alluded to with your evolving relationship. You said around some constructs or principles of freedom that your coach is revealing to you. Are you, even if you're in early phases of that, I'd love to hear more, because that's such an elusive principle for anyone to say, I value freedom, and yet we do have so many things that we feel beholden to. Like what I feel free. The classic example is, would I feel free without this? If I lost this, would I feel like I'm still me, or would that dependency show me that I'm less free than I thought? So, yeah, what are you willing to say about your relationship with the freedom?
So it's certainly been like one of my most primary core values since a very young child, which inspired a lot of rebellion, and me pushing back on a lot of the constructs being thrust upon me. And I've worked with different coaches and mystics and shamans throughout my path. So a lot of times I'll say things that don't necessarily land in the moment, but they'll land a few years later. And so recognizing how the attachment to the way that I was defining freedom ended up kind of working against me in terms of rejecting labels, not wanting to tell people about my achievements or what I had done because of, the stories I had coming from LA and social climbing and ambition and all that nonsense. So I think I rejected that so hardcore and didn't want to be put in any boxes or define myself in any way. And what I realized is like, well, then I can't be of service to people if they don't know what I do, if they don't recognize that I'm good at what I do and that they can trust me, to do what I'm claiming that I want to do. So I realized that it's like the way that I kind of do everything is like, I need to figure it out my own way, even if it's way more painful and way less efficient. And that's just how I've been. So it's like I took this idea of freedom to its outermost limits. And now I'm realizing it's time for me to choose some identity constructs. It's time for me to pin myself down, to introduce myself not as a shit stirrer, but as an author or a consultant, things that are going to allow me to do the things that I came here to do.
That is magnificent. And thank you for that honest self-reflection. Because, thankfully you are my sensei. You are further up the path than I in a few respects. And I take that to heart because I've already felt the limits that come from that. One of the first questions that came to mind due to your study and affinity for language, and especially potentially new language, is just that. Whether it's Lightworker or Akashic record heal, we could pick from the word soup, but the cavern between people who know what some of those words mean, and I used to say things like understanding, and sometimes I still do when I'm referring to something that is much more intuitive, and yet when I get bemused looks from people who don't really know what did you say? So I'm curious, is this part of some bridge building that you're doing for quality and specific language, as opposed to, because you can correct me if I'm wrong, there is still, as Don Lester and I talked about, friend of the show, Don Lester, a friend of ours, choosing some new language, and yet we don't necessarily want to disassociate and disconnect from people just by that. It is in our best interest to make ourselves clear to others. And since, I only know 2 languages, English and profanity, I do have to be as clear as possible with people. So are you it sounds like you're in a bridge building phase as opposed to a bridge burning phase.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to sum it up is, I'm ready to play a bigger game and to be, working with big time needle movers and to allow, to apply my quantum languaging work in the world where it can really help shape culture for the better. And if I'm going to sit on the outside using weird words and phrases that, are so super clever, but no one's understanding what I'm saying.
Yep. I feel that.
Yeah. Or even, I respect the understanding thing. It's never, I get it in terms of hierarchy per se, but I also don't think potatoes are a lesser vegetable than green beans, and those grow in underground, so I'm not putting a value assessment on that, but I get it. And I do think that, there's something to, understanding the frequencies of language and also being able to be understood so that people will want to collaborate with me.
And as well they should, because and if you'll forgive my slight lapse in attention, I was looking to find 2 reviews of your book. Well, one was an absolutely stunning endorsement from Gay Hendricks, and I did not know who Gay Hendricks was until someone recommended to me The Big Leap. And
wasn't that a fantastic book?
Well, and I am sitting with each chapter to deeply self-reflect. I mean, Dani, one of the most profound realizations that I had quite recently, in the last couple weeks, maybe a couple of months, that I probably never thought that I would admit to myself for all the good work and play that I've been doing in the last several years, is that I've had many struggles loving myself. And I can honestly say I never thought I would have an issue with that. I mean, but that was, quite a clear self-deception after a while, because and it actually parallels some of what I've learned about German new medicine, especially around injuries, is that so many physical injuries, aside from running into the wall of a racquetball court and tripping over the net, or tripping over someone else, and there's real collision sports. Of course, we see. From what I see, there's been an exponential growth in non-contact injuries at the professional level, and then on down. And there's many factors to that. What German new medicine proposes is that, and this all being the psycho-emotional elements of disease or any sort of lack of ease or alignment within the body, is a self-devaluation crisis. That usually preceding, which is crisis of confidence, crisis of belief, of self-love, and then that usually manifests somewhere. I mean, pretty much all injuries, unless you snap a bone, are soft tissue. There is some element of soft tissue, also known as fascia, for most people in the growing parlance of that. And, my string of injuries, a lot of that were when I was in some sort of, some foil in my life, usually a loved one. We were at odds, and it's been my nature to take that on myself. And to bring this back into the big leap, I mean, so much of that is the self-deception, or maybe not a self-deception, but a deception around, you got to play small. You don't want to be the too tall tree, getting trimmed. Maybe you don't deserve this. Maybe you really, it's true that any crisis is a crisis of imagination, that we are unable, or we tell ourselves we are unable to imagine ourselves to be in this space where we can be of greater service and impact. And I believe you, I trust, I have full confidence that you are primed and poised to do so. And, I'm sure it's been humbling to say, like, yeah, I got to maybe depart a little bit from this, path that I forged for myself, to weave back into traffic a little bit with, maybe not the mainstream, maybe dip a toe over there, but and to your benefit. I mean, are you making strides with that already, or is this pretty new material for you to work with?
I'm definitely making strides, and it's interesting what you said about German new medicine, and it's super resonant, because I'm also dealing right now with, I've been parasite cleansing for 13 months, and that's its own thing. Go ahead.
No, we shall come back to that.
Okay, we'll come back to that. And I'm working with 3 different coaches right now, because I'm like, all right, we're just going for it. And one of them said to me, parasites can't live in a body that loves herself. And it stopped me in my tracks. I was like, I need you to say that again. I need to hear it. And the synchronicity is that the reason I got connected with Gay Hendricks is because I read The Big Leap, and I sent him an email saying, you don't talk about injuries, and you don't talk about what is the fix for injuries. And he's like, wow, you're such a great writer. I want to know more about you. And he gave me, the fix for that. But that was exactly what I was dealing with. And I don't know if you delved into the 13 calendar paradigm and the different profile system there. But in that system, I am a Skywalker with a lunar moon, and that moon is connected to bodily injuries. And I can also see that in my gene keys as well. So I think there was a part of me that was just kind of victimizing myself to a cosmic makeup that was connected to injuries. So it really hit home to hear you say that around German new medicine. Wow, that definitely tracks, because I'm still mastering self-love.
What tremendous serendipity that was how you, and such is your nature, to say, I'm left wanting from this reading experience. Let me reach out to the author and let him know. And I mean, can you give us any inside baseball in what was his reply to that particular?
His reply, which I actually still use to this day, is whatever's kind of testing my self-worth or my self-love, moving into something I deserve to be in a healthy body. I deserve to have this success and be totally healthy and optimized in my body. And like saying that when I was moving into different kind of physical activities as well, he gave me like mantras around it to kind of reprogram.
And those are tremendously powerful, especially for healing. And one of the early ones that I came to is my body is self-healing and self-regenerating. The self-regeneration aspect and that was first revealed to me through the study of things like tissue salts and the concept of around the fact that we do so much to deplete our resources. For men, it's fruitless ejaculation. I mean, that's a very powerful one, because I don't think you have to be too spiritually in touch to realize that is a form of life. I mean, that is a seed of life, and it does course through us for the most part. When women have a womb, which is whether it is full and fruitful or not, is still the potential for creation. And it's funny how we, there's different language around men are supposed to hold the container. I was given a different perspective around that because women are the vessel. We hold space, but it is more about provision. It is more about what we can inject into life, versus what women can receive. And there's so many things to say about that. But I do want to come back to not to toot my own descriptive horns, but just so people, as a ringing endorsement for you as well, for the language of betterarchy, because I'd like to pursue something that when I was writing this, I wanted to ask you about. My headline on Amazon.com, 5 stars. If there are more, I would have given it for the language of betterarchy, a blueprint for uniting against tyranny, by our guest today, Dani Katz. I wrote that aside from my first education on the English language, such as it is, nothing has had such an immense impact on my ability to effectively communicate as Dani's book. And I mean that, Dani. Working as a coach and exploring the challenges of podcasting, the evolution that has taken place upon reading the language of betterarchy has been profound. All day long, I am being nudged in the direction of language that is affirming my desires, supporting my commitment of clarity, and moving toward a paradigm that reflects my intentions to connect with others. Dani masterfully wields her pen and purpose to deliver an entertaining and thought-provoking view of reality through the medium that shapes it, words. In both spell-breaking and solution-promoting fashion, Dani touches on the dynamics of our culture that we take for granted: power, relationships, self-reflection, trauma, healing, in order to move the needle toward the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. There's more to be said. I mean every word, stand by all that, and I share that with people when I send your book. But especially the idea of, as I'm talking about masculine and feminine dynamics, I believe that men do understand themselves best in hierarchy, and not in the ways that we think about alpha, bravo, anything like that. I mean, there is some depth to the social sexual hierarchy, and the more I explore that, I'm deeply intrigued, because whether this culture has produced it or not, or if there's just a certain quota that a society needs, there are some dangerous gamma males out there who are weak and easily hurtful and resentful and will play really weird games to a lot of them are obsessed with power and not in the real, it turns into more things like force. These are the men that a lot of women are repulsed by for good reason. But even still, I see men, for better or worse, still looking for that hierarchy. I've seen it in many different respects. And when I come back to your book, I agree that there is more of a, well, I'll pause with my thoughts for now and see what you have to say to that, see how that arc aligns or goes in a different direction than your principles around betterarchy and shifting away from the structures that we've come to assume are the way that things should be, ought to be, and will forever be, which, is never the whole story.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the kind words on betterarchy. Very much appreciated. And yeah, this was where I got a little bit stuck for a while, and I put the book away because I knew that hierarchy as a social organizing, like societal organizing structure was distorted, but I also recognized that natural hierarchy exists, and hierarchy is a masculine construct. So I recognize the value for men of hierarchy, and even for women, because we have the masculine, feminine as well. Mm-hmm. And that's when I, had some deep conversations with Richard Rudd, who wrote The Gene Keys, because he's always talking about the synarchy, and I wanted to flesh it out with him. And it's recognizing that both are true. There's always going to be natural hierarchies. You know, walk into any party or whatever, you can see the social mechanics at play, yes. And that's fine. Like, we're not going to change that. But we have this artificially imposed hierarchical structure that attempts to tell us that for there to be winners in the human race, there have to be losers. For there to be a Beverly Hills, there has to be, you know, some Detroit slum, or there, you know, it's like what's happening right now, where like white men are being treated so poorly. Like, all of that is totally artificial. Mm-hmm. So I acknowledge natural hierarchy and that it exists, and there's nothing we're going to do about it because it's primal, like it's baked into nature. But we're operating in a manufactured construct that is doing all of us a disservice because it keeps us in competition with one another, and it keeps us buying into this fallacy of lack and limitation and scarcity. And so we need to like screw each other over to get our little piece of the pie. So that's the hierarchy that I'm looking for us to evolve out of. As far as social hierarchy, it is what it is.
And I'm with you for that. That is, like I said, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible is the head game of thinking that everything is going to be hierarchical is, I mean, that's a real ego deception. I'll pose it first as a question to you. In your experience, in your study of the world and the myriad and manifold dynamics of this realm, do you think that in natural life there is more competition or collaboration?
I look forward to there being more collaboration. I really do. And
Yes.
you know, this is one of the lessons that I've learned the hard way, and I'm just waking up to. I'm having a moment, and I know anyone on a like transformational path has those moments where it's like, wait, I've been doing this. Wait, I've been operating like this. So I'm unpacking one of those moments now and seeing where in business with money, I have been operating collaboratively win-win and assuming if someone's going to pay me or someone's going to follow through, or I'll take the hit because it'll all even out. And I'm realizing it doesn't even out. Like, I've been allowing myself to be a wet blanket who's been screwed over, and that isn't working. So one of the shifts I'm making is, it's not competitive per se, but it's like just having my own back and seeing, even in like when I was doing a lot of freelance journalism in LA, whenever I was pitched a story that didn't resonate with me, I would recommend another journalist who I knew and put them together. And every time the journalists are like, you're the only one who does that. Like, no one else does that. And I don't think anyone's done that with me, but I can count like the few people, like the reason why my Instagram followers are high, and it's not like, yes, I've done my own work there and I've posted every day for forever, but Phil Good is a collaborative, high vibe, awake person. And a couple times he did these lives where I would hop on in the audience and he would say, everyone go follow Dani. And he would just pause and wait. And because he was so generous and collaborative, I would get like these massive spikes. So I look forward to more people operating like that. And I do see more and more people waking up. You know, it is happening, but I think realistically, it seems to be more competitive at this point. How do you see it?
I see more in an elementary study of natural world and natural things, the collaboration in terms of sharing resources. I mean, every time a lion sees an antelope, it's not always pure. Like, the thing about the watering hole is like, the diversity is there. If you're looking for diversity and shared resource, like, it's there. You know, the competition over resources, I think, is overblown. I mean, this to let the foundational myths crumble a little bit around extinct species. I mean, yes, there absolutely is environmental degradation, as we know, but I don't think there's as many people as they say that there are. I don't think there's as much scarcity as is believed. I mean, there's levers being pulled to play that game as well. And then just in a community, I mean, similar to your point, especially in my most successful years in real estate, which got us into this home and floated me for a while, to be sure, and a lot of it was in 2020 and 21, when it felt like everyone and their grandmother could be a realtor, because everyone and their grandmother and their dead grandfather was buying something or selling something. That I've always had the mentality that there's plenty to go around, and I'm really not in competition for cold business, for cold meat with other realtors. And I hear people say all the time, you're the only one who says that, because every realtor they know is like, this is the last deal I'm ever going to do, this is the last home I'm ever going to sell. And they talk a lot about competition to competition. I'm in competition with so and so for this listing, and there's some truth to that. And still, the vision that I have, especially as I grow my field of service, is to have it be, especially because I have this model out there, as referral based as possible. The people who know me, like me, trust me, some combination of those. I am abandoning the need to be liked. I would rather be trusted. I think for people whom I serve, there's enough people who like me. I'm pretty good with that. As long as I like me and love me, I'm pretty happy with that. And I part of my ethics, you could call them business ethics, is to still believe in the win-win. That I was thinking about this the other day, in the scheme of a home sale, the outcome is shared by both parties. For the home to sell, for the home to close, both people have that vested interest. Talk about money spent versus money earned, then we get into the weeds a little bit, and that's where people get very constricted and adversarial potentially. And still, I'm thinking about the outcome, which is that everyone's interest is for this home to close so that you can move on and you can move in. And we lose sight of that because so much of the language and just the way contracts are set up and the way a lot of this system is two adversaries coming together to have this armistice for this period of this contract. Otherwise I'd be trying to get over on you. And I just don't believe in that. I don't see that. When I think some of the language I learned from either Brandon Joe Williams or The Sovereign's Way was the idea of that I am a trustee and that you are a beneficiary. Is that I'm not selling to you, I'm selling for you. I am here to be of service in your interest. I'm not trying to make a commission from you. I'm not trying to just get paid by you. I am looking to circulate my unique flow of energy in your direction for you to take into your spiral and flourish from there. And I'm curious as I think about this focus on service, because this has been, since the start of the year of service, and a lot of that has just been in all the different hats I wear as a coach, as entertainer, educator, energizer, any of that. I can also see how people can lose themselves a little bit in the devotion to service. And I'm curious, for all of your innate independence, have you ever, been so external, like, I need to be of service not only so I can just make money or do my thing, and if it ever, shifted you away from, well, what is my won't power? Really, what am I unwilling to do because that's who I am? Like, has the pursuit of being of service to others ever distracted you from really what is best for me, Dani?
Yes, my whole life. Yes. And this is what I'm really shifting right now, because I think that service piece, I have a little card on my altar that's been there for probably 20 years. And it's one of my little figures, and it says, "How may I serve today?" And that has been my lens of perception, is being of service, being of service, and being of service, and realizing that the overgiving was on me, and it wasn't, there was such a chasm. Like, if we go to the Hermetic principles, the law of reciprocation, I was just way overgiving, and that became very natural for me. And the Bhagavad Gita was, the Tao Te Ching was the first book I read that shook me. And I was, a Hollywood publicist straight out of grad school. and I read the Tao Te Ching, and I'm like, I'm out. And I quit the job, and I bought a one-way ticket
Really?
to Bali, and I'm like, I'm just not even doing this anymore. But the second book that really shifted me was the Bhagavad Gita, and I think it's Arjuna advising Krishna or Krishna advising Arjuna, but like, don't get hung up on the fruits of your labor. Do the work that you came here to do and trust that God will figure it out. So I was operating for so many years, Tom, on like, it doesn't matter what's happening in this realm, in this reality, in this timeline, in the realm of eternity, I'm good. And then I just hit this point of like, no, like this is my one sacred life in this body with this configuration of elements. And I'm tired of being depleted, overwhelmed, overworked, feeling unappreciated, feeling disrespected. And so that is the shift that I'm making now of recognizing like I can be of service to the world, but I can also be of service to myself. And that is the huge paradigm shift of like my mission is now, this is the shift I'm making. So for so many decades, the mission was number one and everything else was secondary. When Mickey and I were writing Plandemic 2 together, he would call me at 1 a.m. and I would get out of bed and do whatever had to be done because I thought, well, we're going to shut this whole thing down and the stakes are so high and I'll just sleep when the world is safe. And I realized I've been operating like this for so long. And it's really just the past month or so where I'm like, I can't wait until there isn't a threat of tyranny to like love myself and rest and be a balanced person. So this is the shift I'm making right now. And it's pretty massive.
I'm certain because I can feel the timbre of emotion in your voice. I'm feeling that with you in a major way, Dani. Those are high stakes for yourself to have that level of self-reflection and all the history of your story that you've built that revolves around. And I have tremendous respect for mission-driven people, the people who are willing to sacrifice any or a lot of themselves in order to achieve and to pursue, especially for noble ideas. And so I'm curious because I do have this written in my We Weary Una Wear Serum Vivus Wiki, which is my Latin for by the power of truth, I, while living, have conquered the universe, which I learned from V for Vendetta, one of my favorite movies.
Such a good one.
Oh, you bet. And just a trip that it's about a virus and a manufactured virus, but it's brilliant. And that came out in 2002. I didn't see it. It used to be on TV with commercials all the time, but we finally bought it and watch it at least once of the year, not least of all around the 5th of November. But that is the name I have for my notes for quotes that I keep. And as I scrolled right past it, because I knew that I had this, as you brought it up, from the Bhagavad Gita, you have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of work.
Yeah.
Desire for the fruits of work must never be your motive in working. How does that quote land with you now compared to when you think you first read it? Because I can see, like, if I read that to Jordan right now, she'd be like, bullshit, you got to pay me, and that's what I'm about. So.
Yeah. I still believe it. Like, I really think I still have like that copy of the Bhagavad Gita that changed my life when I was 21 years old is still the same Bhagavad Gita that is on my altar now. Like, I fully believe that. So as far as like all the books I've written, just take Plandemic 2. Like, I worked so hard on that and went so above and beyond because I really thought we were going to shut this down. I really thought this is going to do it. Everyone's going to wake up and get it. And we're not going to have to go through what we've been going through. And so, whether it's my books or my courses or, the zillion things that I've written that have never been published or are forgotten, like, I don't think that God or the world owes me any accolade or reward for those things. I do those things because that's what I came here to do. That being said, I do deserve to honor myself. I do deserve to be comfortable. I do deserve to be well rested. And that's not tied to the mission or the service. It would be wonderful if the mission was rewarding me. And that's, I'm shifting into as a reality creator, living into that, but I don't put those demands on what I give to the world. Because I don't think the world owes me, and I don't think God owes me. I think I do what I do because something in me is driving me to do them. But they don't owe me anything. For me to expect my books to be #1 bestsellers that bring me millions, it would be nice, don't get me wrong. And I hold that intention, but I don't have that expectation because I see people who hold that expectation, and I see where it puts a lot of pressure. Like even the War of Art. Like I read that book and there's benefit in that book, and I've taken a lot of benefit in that book. But when I look at the crap that Hollywood churns out, it's like, well, that's what it gives us. Like if we're just going to like churn out nonsense so that we could be part of the machine and expect the machine to give back to us, that's fine. That's just not my paradigm. And I don't want to put that much pressure on what I'm giving to the world. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. For those of you listening at home, feel free to add "that's not my paradigm" to your lexicon, because it is highly valuable when you find that you are not in alignment with anything happening around you or anything that people are trying to foist upon you. And it certainly does. And I trust, Dani, that you feel a lightness as you continue to unburden yourself of some of these. I'm feeling lighter from the revelations I've had recently, these things that we're sharing together. And on a personal note, I did intend to ask you on the language front, because I think in Betterarchy, I have this earmarked, unlimited or limitless.
Omniscopic.
Pardon me?
Omniscopic.
Omniscopic, is that your level up for that?
That is.
Which would lead me to one of the core questions I have, which is, do you define words differently than Merriam-Webster? Like, do you take the painstaking steps for the sake of clarity to say, let me tell you exactly what I mean by abundance or energy or omniscopic, for instance? Because, I still play a little bit of that game because I have a love of words, because I spent time with a thesaurus as I write, and as I've written over time, and I do find it interesting. I actually keep an etymological dictionary of the English language right here because I'm much more interested in that. Actually, we went to a bookshop up in the North Shore of Massachusetts several weeks ago where they had an 1863 English dictionary, which
For sale,
which I neglected to buy because I was in a scarcity mindset at the time. And but anywhere between there and 1933, I'm keen to get my hands on, because, as you and I know, the way that, whether it's Mandela effect or can't really trust an online dictionary for sure. But I do still find that useful to say, here's what I mean. Here's the import of this word. If it's a breakdown of its etymology, or interestingly enough, the way people use believe. There is the word, to belie. There is a lie in there. There actually is, in some thesauruses, that the antithesis of belief is truth. So I find those things very interesting. But let's start with omniscopic, and then you can tell us if you take the time to define words for people, or if you just say, I'm going to let that land with you, however it's going to land with you. Because that's pretty much what's going to happen anyway. Is the way that we use words, to be specific, when I say energy, I am more specific with people I am talking about your ability, especially in health conversations, your bio battery. Do you feel like you have most of your energy available today to do everything that you want to do to the best of your ability? Or do you feel like you're running at 80, 70, 50%? That's why I love how Eileen McCusick talks about charge. Are you charged up? Do you feel fully charged for your day, for your life, for your mission, for your family, etc.? So I'm seeking more definitive communication with that. But omniscopic, if you please, how do we define and use that in a sentence?
So omniscopic, which grew out of cinescopic. So for anyone who has my Yes, I Am coloring book, that is the earlier iteration when I was figuring out what the just right replacement word for limitless and unlimited would be, because when we say unlimited or limitless, we're invoking the frequencies of limitation. The subconscious mind doesn't hear the un or the less. So omniscopic means every moment access to every potentiality that ever was, is, or will be. So it allows us to be in the frequency of what we call unlimited or limitless without invoking that limitation. So then we truly can be in the realm of every possibility that is available to us, right? That's one of the traps of language, is like, you're unlimited, right? Tell that to someone. It's like you've just put the cage of limitation. It's like the ultimate gaslighting is to tell someone that they're unlimited, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of defining terms. Not only will I define my terms, but I will very often ask in the middle of a conversation, I'll interrupt and say, wait a minute, how are you defining this term?
Absolutely.
Because I want to make sure that we're understanding one another. And I don't get hung up on like whether that's what the word really means. Like, I'm like you, I have, a bunch of dictionaries. I've got the giant one under my desk, the etymology, the Latin, all of that. It doesn't matter. It's like, if I'm in a conversation with someone, I don't want to be right. I want to connect. I want us to optimize our alchemy. I just want to understand how they're defining words so that I know what we're talking about. And I think it's like communication 101, healthy communication 101, especially if there's an inkling of conflict or tension. Stop, ask for definitions so we understand what we're talking about and can just get ourselves on the same page. And I also believe that it's the responsibility of the communicator to be understood. So if I'm using a word or speaking about something that you're not understanding, that's on me. That's on me to communicate more clearly. So I love that as a coach, you're already defining your terms. I think that's so generous and compassionate to give that to the people who we're wanting to help, to unpack the concepts that we're using.
And I generally lead with, and to follow your example as well, I do my best not to use technical jargon. I mean, but so there's do you know what pronation is? Pronation of your hand? Okay, yes. So I tell people, because I hear almost every tennis pro say, you got to pronate. You got to practice pronation. I say, pronation is a country where professionals live. Other than that, you don't really need to know what it is, because I'm going to show you it's basically thumb up to thumb down. And I try to, simplify. And I had coaches, the people who I learned how to teach, who taught me how to teach tennis virtually, and I'm immensely grateful to them and their program, because it's all free. I mean, it's 300 hours of tennis teacher education, how to teach the sport, and they're all about, you need to find 20 different ways to say the same thing, because you don't, depending on who you're talking to, you can't just hammer them over the head with the same tool and expect it to sink in. And whether it's junior players, so kids from 5 and up who might be on the court, or adults, I say, if I say something to you that does not make sense, it is not because you're stupid, it is not because you don't get it, it's that I need to do a better job, so please let me know. Because the last thing I say, I do my best, if I say, do you follow me so far? Long pause. I say, please tell me if you do not, especially the sequence of something as highly technical as tennis. And that is my responsibility. That is my ability to respond, to put myself in that situation. If I'm going to be a leader, if I'm going to be, when I am a leader, as in that role as leader, to lead myself as well. When I sit with myself, there's noise, and it's up to me to ask myself. That's why I have a hot bath most nights, and the best ones are when I don't have any phone or book, is I just get to sit in silence. That was where I had my great revelation that I wrote about on Substack, which I think you'll appreciate that I mentioned in the introduction. When I refer to anything as an upgrade, as a detox, as a visit from the pain teacher, it's not to bypass my feeling of dis-ease or illness. It's that I am choosing language that is affirming my healing. And I went on to talk about, well, it's a must. I mean, I can't really imagine any other way, because whether it was FOVID or anyone who has received a diagnosis, to say I have is possession. It's saying I'm possessed. That some spirit has possessed me, and I'm helpless. And unless we get a priest in here or a rabbi, who am I to save myself? And it doesn't have to be like that at all. And I went on to talk about just especially in the bath, realizing that there was something that I had bypassed with my logical mind that left me. It was learning something that I literally choked on what I was hearing. I did not feel that I was free to express myself. I wanted to scream with rage and disappointment. Wasn't unfortunately socially acceptable at the time, and I've since had that out. But I lost my voice for the whole month of August because of that. And thankfully, which, as you can imagine, intensely humbling and frustrating and saddening. And the first place I went was at because I have my German New Medicine study that I keep up with, and similar approaches to healing. The first place that I went, and whether it's just my natural disposition or a program that I used to be part of, as you know, I don't say my programming, I say a program that I used to participate in, and I have since opted out. Which, I mean, again, this is just the most empowering language that I learned from you, and I encourage other people to pursue, because I first went to myself. I said, well, if my voice has been taken from me, have I been dishonest? Have I been using my voice ineffectively? Is this teaching me to clean up because I can be guilty of that on the court. Someone asks you a question and you're just trying to be helpful and enthusiastic and you're a runaway train. And I took that very personally. And when that did not bring me to a place of growth and healing, I finally went back to what my heart was telling me, which was, you got hurt and you were surprised and caught off guard, and your logical mind, is easy to bypass that, but the body doesn't care. The body is importantly, thanks to people like Alec, I start to think of the subconscious mind, capital M mind. People, we beseech you, we implore you to think about mind beyond your brain. Joseph Campbell actually does a brilliant job of talking about intelligence or mind intelligence, that our holistic existence, there is intelligence to that. There is a mind to that. And when you said subconscious mind does not hear the distinction between limitless, unlimited, it's like that is the meat of the sandwich right there. And I was taught, especially in the world of mantra, in the world of, there was a Olympic sharpshooter, rifle shooter, Lenny Basham, who promoted a lot of ways that we can bring in affirmation and imagination to train our subconscious mind to surpass performance anxiety and things like that. And it was from him and his work that I learned that the subconscious mind does not know when you're joking. To say, you fucking idiot, when you miss a ball, that's impossible. I could never do that. Or, I'm just no good at that. Even if you try to laugh it off, even if you're being, self-deprecating, which can be, a bit of a slow poison, I think people would be shocked at how much that deepens a groove that we have. And I believe the subconscious mind is more in the body, that gets suppressed and stored in the body. That's when we get into self-devaluation and injuries come up. That's when we get into stuckness of energy. And I'm just curious how you came to that realization, or what that has unlocked for you, whenever you can catch yourself. And you have a great tactic, I believe, to, if you ever catch yourself vocalizing any language that is not supportive of loving yourself or building your talents and abilities, how you catch that. So I'll kick it to you to see what that all brings up in you.
So the clear, cancel, delete is absolutely a superhero tool as we're learning to master deliberate, conscious, mindful word usage. So it's a way of letting the subconscious mind know, like, no, we're starting over. I do it myself, where I'll be mid-sentence, hear the disempowering, cut myself off, clear, cancel, delete, restate it. Krishnamurti was he was such a profound teacher for me in that he did not say clear, cancel, delete. And I listened to numerous lectures that he did. It seemed like he was in the practice of eschewing personal pronouns. And so I heard him on a number of occasions use a personal pronoun, stop himself mid-sentence, and then restate it from the impersonal. And I thought, like, what a badass, like this awakened man in front of an audience, to have that humility and self-awareness to do that. So I got a lot of permission from that. So for me, it started, I was a competitive gymnast all growing up, and I injured my wrist. and spent about a year getting cortisone shots, had 4 operations, and ultimately they didn't fix it. But that was my first experience of doctors bestowing these limiting pathologies on me. So I remember when the doctor said, "You'll never do a handstand again." And I think it was like 16. And I said, "Yes, I will." And I just, anything that they said, I was just like, "No, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong." And then, I've always
what hubris? I don't understand that hubris, because that doesn't. I don't think a healer would do that. I don't think real healers do that.
It's amazing to me how often doctors speak like that, and I don't think they have ill intent, but it's exactly the arrogance of attempting to project a lifetime limitation onto another person. It's the ultimate in wrong use of will. I think it's so abusive and so out of line.
It is, and it's more reflective of what many of us suffer from, which is the pure left brain is we got to go right to worst case scenario instead of what's the best that could happen. Which is a pivot that I am embracing all over again, because I've been in, what's the worst that could happen.
And I think there's some scenarios where if we do it lightly and it's not an unconscious habit, there can be value to that. But as I write in, my first quantum languaging book, Word Up, we all have permission to write our stories however we want to. That's all authority means, is our God-given right to author our stories how we want to. So we can write our stories for the kinder. We can lean into best case scenario and loop on best case scenarios and live into those, which I'm so excited for our society to embrace. So the other thing is I always had real weird rashes as a kid, and I still do, right? And at this point, I just say they're communications from my home planet. But I had doctors from a little kid on, giving me these awful pathologies. You have a blood disease, you have lupus, and every time I was like, "No, I don't, no, I don't, no, I don't, you're wrong." So for whatever reason, just because I was like a strong-willed little rebel, I just would not embrace the limiting pathologies that doctors would thrust upon me. So it really came through my body. And, to this day, whenever there are a couple injuries I've had where I'm aware in the moment that there's a distortion, right? That it kind of wasn't supposed to happen. Like I'm thinking about when I, sprained my knee in Hapkido kicking the bag. Like I probably shouldn't have been doing that if I'm being real with myself.
Yeah.
But 99% of the time when there's an injury, I'm trusting that my body's reorienting and that this is happening for me and this needs to happen. And I trust it and I don't question it. And I am constantly telling my body that I'm so pleased with how quickly it's healing and regenerating. And I love this upgrade. And every time, Tom, I've noticed this the past couple years, my racquetball game will improve by leaps and bounds after I come back from an injury. So it's the practice of just deciding. It's really a choice. It's a decision that everything is happening for me and for my best interest, and it's always an upgrade. And I'm not sure if this was specifically your question, but that's the end of this part of my response.
Thank you for that definitive delineation, that emphatic delineation, and it's positively brilliant because, and many of us have been there with injuries, that the despair that sets in, often around what is it, or why did it happen, and even for me, part of the punchline of writing that whole essay was I went through time of confusion and frustration and sadness and why now and why like this, and it wasn't even an injury, although it still feel like I was less than my best because this is such a powerful instrument that I use liberally, and and there's identity things with that, losing your voice, and I do have a note to talk about your voice training, voice journey, what that's been like, but for sure that Gosh, I have so many things swirling right
Can
now.
I jump in on the voice part?
Please,
Do you mind?
yes. No, go for it. Go for
Um,
it.
so because I think like we all have our processes around these. So if the doubt and the negative emotions come up, I think it's really important to go there, right? So that we can get to the source and see what's behind it. I did my first Vipassana in India in 2000. And it was freezing cold. It was in Bodh Gaya. I
And,
was
and where is that in the geography of India?
So that's North India. Bodh
Okay.
Gaya is where Buddha became enlightened. So I
Ah,
spent the
okay.
the millennium New Year's under the Bodhi tree, and then I
Shoot.
went right into Vipassana. But it was freezing cold, and this particular Vipassana, so it's 10-day silent meditation retreat. We were required to do some volunteering in the kitchen, and I was just like not all pistons were firing in my brain. And so my job was to peel the carrots. And everyone knows in India, like, you don't eat raw vegetables, and you certainly don't eat raw root vegetables because people are literally pooping in the fields.
Yes.
So I peeled all the carrots for like 100 people, and I accidentally threw all the carrot peelings in the well. So I poisoned the water supply for the entire retreat. And then one of the instructors went off on me and started swearing at me. It wasn't like compassion. It was like, you're a fucking idiot. What the hell is wrong with you? And I felt so terrible that I jumped the fence in the middle of the night and I left. It was only 7 days in. So there were 3 more days that I was supposed to be silent. I didn't finish the retreat. So I left in the middle of the night, and I was just waiting in front of a chai shop for it to open to get a chai, and then I was going to get a train ticket. And when I went to order my chai, when it opened, I had no voice. And I had laryngitis for the rest of the 10 days. And I knew this is supposed to happen. I made a commitment to not speak for 10 days, and this is the universe making sure that I keep that commitment. So for whatever reason, with physical stuff, I've just learned to trust this is exactly how it's supposed to happen, even if it's uncomfortable, even if I don't like it, even if I'm not doing things that I want to be doing. I just am constantly connected to a story that everything is happening for me. And it's definitely served me as a very embodied, physical, active person.
That's a tremendous story, and so I feel you to have those gut checks, especially for me to in my mind or at least in my brain to conceptualize the idea of, yes, I trust that my body is brilliant, and then you get a gut check to can I really? And there was really no, because I had so many people saying, do you have laryngitis? Do you have an infection? Did you go see your doctor? Did you get antibiotics? And part of the program comes up, it's like, fuck, what could I take? What could deliver me from this? And why would I rob myself of that experience in the end? Whatever the pain teacher is here to teach me. And I agree with you for injuries. One of the stories I told is, I think it was end of last year in October, I definitely slipped a disc in my lower spine, which is something that has happened before. Contributing to so many factors. That's root chakra for the most part, and all the things that go, the real lower part of your sacral or even lumbar spine. So many issues on the emotional front there, and also some physical things that I can do better because it's never just one thing. And then, I just remember I did all the thing. I threw the kitchen sink at it in terms of tissue salts, hydration, movement. I remember laying down because it was late October, and when it really started to get cold, laying down half naked on the earth in the cold, in the sunshine, with the ground starting to freeze and things like that, but just breathing into the earth. And within a week, I played some of the best tennis of my life, like electric, serve volley, just moving like a leopard, like I love to do, and it has been an upgrade every time, and to the point where this is part of why I do feel qualified in terms of lived experience, is that I have been through skin issues as well. The things that I've changed, both on the dietary front and the recognition around from German New Medicine, a lot of it is separation conflict, is some sort of separation, and also our skin that's our shield from the world. Have we let people infiltrate our boundaries? Have we let people, penetrate us in any way? And a lot of it is through not just the toxins of vaccination, but we do have parents who, thinking they're doing the best, say, here you go, please pierce my child and inject them with things that are ostensibly meant to save them. And I have no illusions around that, which I talk about frequently. And that leads me to an early question I had.
Tom, do you mind if I stay here? Do you mind?
Please.
I don't mean to hijack us, but there's just so much here because I think,
There is.
And granted, like, you're a man, so I'm guessing you're going to lean more into masculinity. For me as a Gen X woman, I think post-second wave feminism, like, spun me out the way a lot of my peers, so I've been on a path for a long time to learn to operate from the feminine, be in my feminine, recognize what that is. So as a go person, a lot of times these injuries for me are an opportunity to rest, to stop. Like, I even heard, what can I take, to move? And I'm exactly the same way. And I learn so much when the universe knocks me down to be in stillness and rest, because it hasn't been natural for me. But I also think the word pain is a psyop. And when I was in that first trip to India, I found this book on pain that it just loosened the idea of, like, we have this umbrella term pain, which is totally demonized. And then in the West, we're trained to, like, fix it or numb it or barrel over it. But there isn't such thing as pain. There's different quality of sensation, whether there's heat or it stings or it burns. And I was bit by a bullet ant in Costa Rica, which has it's like the highest, most painful insect bite. And so I spent a good 6-7 hours in a hammock, just incapacitated in silence, being with the pain. And I find when there's sensation that's that intense, to just go into it as deeply as possible and surrender to it I learn so much. I build so much resilience. I learn so much about myself. And I think that the Western way of, like, getting rid of pain or, what can I take to get me through this? I find for myself, there's a lot of value in just sitting with the infirm, the stillness, the not doing what I want to do. I learn so much about myself when I go through those moments.
Would you be willing and able to share one gem from your treasure chest of self-realization from a moment of pain? If anything sticks out from that particular experience or even recent ones?
I think it's just recognizing that the pain is a tiny piece of a temporary experience, and my capacity to be with it is so much bigger than I would imagine. I don't need to numb it. I don't need to rush it out. I can just be with it and trust that it's my body healing and reconfiguring in the quickest, easiest way. It's like, it goes back to me just trusting, like, that the universe has it. When I freak out about what's happening with the world situation, it's like, wait a minute, do I know better than God how this is supposed to unfold? That I'm telling the world that it's wrong? So it's kind of the same thing where it's like, can I just trust that my body's doing what it needs to do, and I can be with discomfort, and I don't have to distract, and I don't have to numb, and I can handle discomfort? I think it builds my character.
It does. I did an episode long ago, not that long ago. I'm still pretty green to all of this. Although I think this will be 105. So, I'm past the century mark, which is exciting. And I thank you. And to you, because, I began with the end in mind. I'm not going to do this unless it's going to be something that I continue to improve at for a long time. Because when I listen to people like, Joe Rogan was part of my journey early on. It's been many, many years. I want to emphasize many years since I've consumed that program. But it was absolutely part of my journey to inspire that, as I listened to him and people celebrated him, I said, that's first generation. I can do better. We can do better, that this space will evolve. And even still, I did an early episode, I want to say within the first couple dozen, called PAIN as an acronym for Personal Accountability is Necessary, because of my own experiences with that I'm going to take account of myself, and that is what is going to see me through. And that accountability is, I can probably handle this. I'm not going to let it define me. And I also realized, Dani, from that experience and others, that to your point about the sensation of pain, however we experience that, and it is a spectrum, a lot of it is anticipatory. And what I mean by that is that, and I don't know all of the neurological elements of this. I do believe I've read about this before, to say nothing of my experience, but it is, when I make this next move, my back will hurt. When I do this one activity, that's when my pain flares up. Of course, people say it all the time. When I go play tennis, or when I do this particular exercise, that's when my shoulder hurts or whatever. And so yes, there's a story there, but it is a slightly subconscious rising to the conscious anticipation. And I think we can imagine the many ways that permeates our more relational experiences. Now I've done that. I've been vulnerable before. I've opened up to someone. I've gone after the thing that I wanted, and there was pain there. So I'm not going to go back to that.
Yeah.
And
I think the other thing with like injuries or pain or those things is, because exactly like you said, there's the anticipation and the fear of like, oh, this next step is going to hurt. And then the resourcefulness for me of, well, how can I move my body differently so that it doesn't? So I think it makes me more nimble and resourceful and more compassionate, not just to myself, because it's like, okay, that hurts, so we're going to do it differently, but also to other people, especially the elderly. Like, I think that I was really afraid of elderhood growing up, and I didn't have models of it. And I would see old people and I would be afraid or maybe resentful or angry. And I think that the more that I deal with like pain and limitation myself through the temporary injuries that I've endured, I have more compassion for people who are aging or who are dealing with, something that's painful. Like, it just makes me a more loving, compassionate person. And then the other piece is, I coach people who've been diagnosed with like chronic illness or degenerative illness, people with MS, or Parkinson's, and they'll say, I can't do this anymore. And I'll say, no, you're being invited to do it a different way. And that reframing of, it's not that you can't, you're being invited to engage more creatively and to just do things differently. And it gives us a chance to change our self-conception and our self-identity. So I think pain is such a beautiful teacher. I don't wish it upon people. I'm not wishing it upon myself. And it's a phenomenal opportunity. Pain, sickness, illness, limitation, when we stay with it, when we don't reach outwards to make it go away, but when we're conscious and aware and we're working with it, I think it's alchemical gold.
And there's a tremendous mantra in there for the value of that gold, and you would never wish it on someone, and you would also never intend to absolve someone of that pain, of that experience, because a lot of us have had pain the last couple of years, in any respect. And for me, a lot of it was, I just the pain of starting to walk a different path, and it coincided with divorce in my family and revelations in my family with that, just cracked open this entirely different, just cracked open the egg of like, I thought we were this whole thing, and now, okay, there's new life inside. There's new opportunity to move on from that. And I'm so glad we lingered on this as long as we have, because especially at Confluence, that was where so many people, we talked about our stories, and very, very rare is the person who said, yep, I've just been, all love and light since birth. And, I haven't had any real ruptures in my reality that have, and that's really what it's been for us, Dani, and I speak mostly for myself, the invitation to see things and do things in a different way.
Yes.
That's been my experience about any pain that I felt, whether it was feeling the world's pain in 2020 and beyond. Like you, I'm very conscious. I refer to it as 2020, 21. I don't say, because people still say COVID, which is wild to me. Or people, I'm around people who still say so-and-so, is worried they have COVID. I said, you don't need to be worried. I say, I'm not afraid of germs anyway. But as we begin our descent here, one element I did plan to circle back to was in the conversation around freedom. I've had this realization because my love just observed this to me the other day, in a moment of pure transparency with you and with myself, and just because when I tell these stories, I mean, it's to give other people those nudges to reflect, and like we're talking so much about things that we didn't think that we were experiencing or revealing to ourselves. We do. It often helps to have a mirror, which is what 12 years of relationship is all about, and that's the real church, to have that reflection experience for sure, and all different kinds of relationships. But she reminded me that I used to be unwaveringly optimistic. Mm-hmm. And we both pinpointed, I like to think myself first, but Virgos get the credit for being highly critical, highly observant in the best of ways, that part of the truther, how would we say, paradox, or just the two edges of the sword, is that the more you become aware of the genuinely evil forces, I'm not going to bypass the evil in our world, there is. Many of it is perpetrated by humans under, some sort of possession, or their sole contract is that I am here to be, the pain teacher to a lot of people, and we're grateful in our own way for that experience. If it doesn't take you all the way to pessimism, it brings you more to the place of it just kind of is what it is, and might be great, might be not, plan for the worst, hope for the best type thing. And that's been a good shakeup for me, because it's out of alignment with as much as I profess and maintain the principles of radical responsibility and freedom, that there are still these corners of myself where I'm saying, they've got my number there, and what am I to do in the face of tyranny, which we talk about, or other people's ignorance or whatever. And so the question that I initially wrote down when you talked about from an early age being that defiant little you, of no, that's not my diagnosis, and any rejection with that. Either take us, if you would, to the first or even the most recent place where you saw or you felt that freedom was somehow out of your hands, and if you've been able to alchemize that into saying, no, there is an element where I can embrace more freedom, for myself at least.
Wow. Okay. I've been focusing a lot, I know you listen to my podcast, on what's been going on in Santa Fe.
Yes.
And really looking under the hood at how it's being messed with, how the divide and conquer op.
I'd love to see you do Boston as well, because, you said it's most likely a theme in metropolitan areas.
Yes. And I do think that what I'm seeing is the way it's happening everywhere. I think it's just because it's so much smaller here that it's easier for me to figure out the pattern.
And that's worth your presence as well, because that is I'm all for that, Dani. That's part of why I loved that and read that, because, why obsess about what goes on in LA when you don't live there,
or Israel, or the Congo, or any of those. It just it got so ridiculous. And for me, I'm constantly keeping in check the aspect of me that likes to pretend that she incarnated to save the world. And I'm like, that's adorable, and you can play that way, but let's not give the 5-year-old the keys to the castle. That's a tiny little piece. So I'll discover some things and realize oh my God, they have such a stronghold. They've been working at this for so long. There's so many realms that are out of my control, and where they really seem to be moving their gross plan forward. And then for me, it comes back to, am I going to give my peace of mind and my optimism to a bunch of psychopath lizards? Or am I going to continue to rest in my creatorship and remember, ultimately, it's about the people? The people are the ones who are the on-the-ground minions. And so my focus is handling myself well with my fellow humans in my community, and walking my talk, and not letting perceived ideological differences be a barrier between collaborating or just being pleasant to one another. So I've kind of moved away from trying to control how it's going, and recognizing I have the freedom of how I want to respond and how I want to handle myself in the face of a lot of things that are not in my control. And at the same time, when I can take action, I do, because that quells a lot of some like anxiousness has in the past moved through me around like, okay, I'm watching these terrible things happen. So I'll give you an example. When I was researching this article that I put out last month, I went through the mayor's campaign finance filings, and I found a bunch of payments that I'm like, these are really fishy. Like, I'm not buying these at all. They went to a personal injury attorney, not a election campaign attorney, like, and just the dollar amounts, the timing. I'm like, I think these are payouts to the paid protesters who tore down the statues. So I filed a Freedom of Information Act because I'm like, let me do what I can to enact justice, but I'm not going to go crazy about it. So they ignored my request, and they just keep asking for these extensions because I think they're just trying to wait until his term runs out at the end of this year. Yeah. And I noticed that I was getting like distracted and bunged up, and like, I'm not okay with this. So I escalated the complaint to the AG. So for me personally, when I take these little steps, it's like I'm doing what I can, what is realistic. I'm not allowing it to overtake me. And then going back to like, am I being the change I want to see in the world? Am I walking my talk? Am I acting as a collective, us and we? And that's kind of how I'm playing the game right now, if that makes sense.
It does. And one thing that I'm inspired to hear from that is, yes, you look at the machinery and the momentum that is behind so many of these behemoths. I think one thing that I have a great deal of optimism around the more I study this for myself is with the legal versus lawful system that we have in this country of the United States of America, since it has so many different iterations from an ideal, from a nation, from a corporation, and there are different, like I said, iterations for that, is that not only is it fairly new, and yes, there's a lot of, like I said, just a lot of structure and force behind it, mostly threat of force. Like most things, Dani, I believe that our consent is still required, our opt-in is still required, and the maxim that ignorance is no excuse is a bona fide one for the law. You can still be punished despite your ignorance, which I think is fairly just in a way. And so the more that we continue to apprise ourselves of what we can do, and we do have options. It's not the rhetoric around slavery, whether it's debt slavery or yes, there is psychological warfare. The choice, is really what it all comes down to. I believe in our free will. I believe that, as we add to our wisdom, there are some objective and universal truths. And then there are the choices we make that work best for us. And whether, of course, that is the brilliance of our path, is that we get to stay, decide which fights we will pick, which ones we will, walk away from for now. And then, when you were saying, why would I obsess about the Congo or Israel? It's a cliche, but it's true. Until we can come together to unify and clean up our own backyard, we really don't have any business telling other people what to do with theirs. Even if there is injustice and suffering there, which there is, it is incumbent upon those people to, lean into their circumstances. And when they need help, we need to have some experience of doing it for ourselves locally before. Make America small again is my T-shirt idea, because if you can make it small and get away from, I do agree with you about the people, but it is more, the men and women, and not the idea of, the voters or the public. More the public is what I have an issue with, is you cannot possibly ascribe to that group, even though people try to do, even in huge percentages of, 52% voted for Trump or whatever, there is no the public, but that is what a lot of the lizards depend on, is big groups, big ideas, big numbers that you cannot comprehend. The sun is 39 million miles away, spinning at a rate that you've never heard of. And, as always, like the likes of Dr. Gober would say, Mark Gober, prove it. or show me, and and good luck with that. So the things that we can prove and the things that we can have intimate experiences with are our spiritual practices and that which goes into and out of our body. The two 13s that you brought up today as we land the plane here, Dani, to be respectful of your time, is you mentioned your 13 months of parasite cleansing.
Yes.
And then I'm curious as well, first of all, if that will continue, if there have been any revelations as you continue to lighten yourself, and whatever you care to say about that. And then if you will be engaging in the 13 sacred nights this year.
So yes, and I'd love to have an offline conversation with you about it because I have it written in my book, and I'm aware, like, I know I'm going to need accountability and support about it. So yes, I am very excited. Are you going to be engaging in it?
Absolutely, yeah. Last year, as I look at my, I can share with you because my spirit guide for the month of December is vervain.
Okay.
Which is, if you're familiar with vervain, it is an herb with principles of detoxification. And I wrote just as the first line, welcome vervain to my wisdom council for December. This was on January the 5th of this year. And I said, I accept your invitation to detox my physical and emotional poisons before embarking on my next cycle. And early days of December, like I said, so much self-realization, letting go, getting rid of the limits, the poisons, the things that really do not serve me. It's already happening. And so many themes have aligned with, my spirit guides as they do. So I found it deeply practical and profound last year as it's been manifest this year. And Laura and I had a great conversation a couple weeks ago as well that, people have really taken to and got some more buzz for it. And I highly recommend it because it deeply enriches this time of year as we get ready for regeneration, as I was talking about with one of my dear friends the other day, who's a food forest permaculturist in Florida, now moving to the San Antonio area as of this Friday. He talks about how things are slumbering this time of year. The trees aren't dead. It's not that things are dead. They are slumbering, as we do. And so, yeah, highly recommend. But we can pivot to parasites, which are very much alive.
So this is a big one. So we're just, I'll do my best to just touch on it. So, I started doing, you mentioned, like, I feel like FOVID was traumatic for everyone. I don't think anyone got out of FOVID unscathed. And I have been healing the kind of outcast trauma from that for a while. And I got into doing really high dose mushroom journeys as a tool to help me do that. And so it was the day after I did a high dose mushroom journey that my mouth was off. Like, it just was irritated and blistered and it was weird. And I thought, okay, well, I must be purifying the results of wrong speech because I saw so much of that in the journey. And, as I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to ride this out. This is what needs to happen. And then it didn't go away. So long story short, it started to show up in different ways. And it took about a year and a half to realize, I'm dealing with parasites. So I was using, I found the Just Right protocol and a lot of stuff was leaving my body. And it occurred to me a couple months ago, like, it hasn't slowed. Like, the amount of things that are coming out of me isn't lining up with my diet. I don't eat anything that would feed them. This isn't making sense. So I tapped in and I realized, these are rope worms. So when I asked the internet, they say rope worms are a conspiracy theory. They're pseudoscience. The only people who believe in them are anti-vaxxers. So I'm like, I recognize that propaganda. I'm clearly onto something.
Yep.
So I had a call with Brian from Sauna Space about it, like a 2-hour call. And it seems like genetically modified food is creating these rope worms, which have 5 different phases and show up in different ways. So I'm on a new protocol. There's this amazing product called Novolytic, and I'm excited to meet the woman who created it and have her on my show. And it is shocking what is coming out of me. It's crazy. but it's also like, I don't want to be one of those crazy conspiracy theorists who's like always pulling some Morgellons crap out of her face, you know? So I'm kind of at an inflection point where it's like, am I just going to be parasite cleansing for the rest of my life? Or do I shift into a different, like mindset about this? Or is it about the frequency in my belly? So I'm figuring it out. And I'm not sure if ropeworms are connected to like, spike proteins, which when I look at the timing of it, I'm like, wow, this did all start when people started getting those injections. So I reached out to Chris Crutchfield because he's one of the most out there, of our tribe. And I'm like, can we just have a conversation about ropeworms? So right now I'm in this like research phase of talking to other really out there thinkers. Cause I did have someone tell me that there are worms from Saturn. And that the reason why conspiracy theorists get ropeworms is because we are so multidimensional, and so that we can travel multidimensionally. It's like, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
But
they are definitely aliens. I mean, that's
yeah. And then I have another friend who thinks that like the archons are operating in this realm through our gut through parasites. So Emily and I are playing with it. Like, I think there's a much bigger unpacking. And it does feel good, as always, to take my health in my own hands and to reclaim the sovereignty of my gut and be like, no, we're not having any freeloaders in here.
No free passengers. Thank you very much.
No.
You will pay the toll at some point.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to staying apprised of where that inflection point takes you, and that is what we're all called to do, is remain curious. And like great tennis players, we're always in transition to another destination. We don't get to stay in one spot for long. Before you tell us where anyone can find you and interact with you, Dani, it may seem a little kitschy, but I like to come back to this. Since this is home court health, 3 quick-fire questions for you to bring us home here. What is something you've done lately to make your home a more nurturing, restful place?
Oh, I love this question. So when these ropeworms leave my body, it's existentially disturbing to see.
Yeah.
Like, I've had some people tell me, like, that's just stomach mucus. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it isn't on any level. So when they leave, like, I feel really tender and vulnerable, and like I just want to curl up and be cozy. So I pulled this beautiful yak blanket out of storage, and it had some moth holes in it. So I spent the weekend patching the moth holes with like really beautiful fabric and like really beautiful threads. So my cozy, newly patched blanket is my latest upgrade.
Spectacular. And you didn't just say, "Oh, I'll just buy a new one." You said, "Oh,
no,
this one." No,
I'm a mender. I love safeguarding what I have and taking care of it instead of replacing it.
There's our more beautiful world for sure. And on the court, or your chosen arena of competition, which for you is the racquetball court.
Yes.
Where are you finding success? It's not winning or losing, it's winning and learning. So what lessons are you learning on the racquetball court these days?
Okay, I've had a breakthrough just in the past like week or two where, and I know you as a coach will understand this, where like enough of the basics and fundamentals are set into muscle memory so that now my attention is available for more strategy and other things. So I'm at the point in my game where I can track which direction the other player is traveling in and put the ball in the opposite direction, which is like mildly sadistic, and I love it. It's like a little bit psychotic to just put the ball where I know they're not going, and it's such a perverse, awesome pleasure.
Yeah, to make them look foolish, make them look stupid. Yeah, and that is the best place to be, and you know, it's I am fully supportive of you on that goal too. When we tell players to feel free, is that talking about subconscious mind. Your coaches, especially in tennis, you've received all the instruction and all the reminders ad nauseum. You need to trust yourself at some point, so then you can be in that open focus state to adapt and respond, anticipate, in your field of play, so that it's not, am I holding it right? Did I turn? Is the elbow up? We do not have the bandwidth to do all that and play a smart shot.
And that's the beauty of drills. And that's the beauty of constructive feedback. Like, I also take swing dancing classes, and I had class last night, and I noticed some students get a little defensive when the teachers correct them. And I'm like, I want to know every way that I can improve.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm here. Lay it on me so that I can be better.
And I mentioned this recently, and I'll give you the credit, especially when I have my Robert Phoenix told me that I work really well with women, so I've leaned into that. He didn't just tell me that; it's from my astrological chart, from my natal chart.
What is the placement that tells him that?
I will have to review a fair bit of water, throughout is what I recall.
Got it.
But,
what is your sun sign?
I'm born April 21st, so cusps are bullshit, as you know. So I am a Taurus.
Nice.
Yes.
Oh, Jordan's a lucky lady.
It's nice of you to say. And my moon is in Virgo, and I believe hers might be in Taurus. So we have some beautiful alignments for sure. And I gifted her for her 30th a reading with Robert Phoenix, and I think he attended your talk, which is when we saw him at Confluence, and she is one of the cheesiest, most hilarious people that I've ever met. Aww. And she walks up to him and she says, "Robert Phoenix, I'm starstruck." And I think he laughed. I think he chuckled a little bit.
So sweet.
But so with my groups of ladies, so I often have, like today, ladies practice. It's 8 women and me and one other coach, or I have groups of adult beginners who are, again, same thing, 8, 9, and it's all women. But I have abandoned saying, if you please. I just tell those ladies where they need to go, what they need to do. And, some of it is I'm just being polite, and they don't think I'm barking at them, but it's, you're here to be led. I am your leader. So
thank you for that.
Oh yeah.
Like, that right there is such a win. I love that.
Huge win. And finally, other than parasite cleansing, what is something that you've started practicing or finding a consistent practice with your health that is highly rewarding and nurturing?
Okay, so I developed a relationship with my fascia back in LA when this brilliant woman, Anna Rahe, used to teach these fascia classes. And then I was just kind of left to my own devices, but I just actually invested in a Black Friday special I do block classes every single day. I wake up at 5 a.m. and I head straight to my block and I do half an hour of blocking. And I just for anyone who hasn't developed a relationship with their fascia, especially as an embodied, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's a total paradigm shift. And I love starting the day, being kind and loving to my body. I love how yin it is. It's such a beautiful practice. I highly recommend it.
It is working in to balance all the working out that we do.
Yes.
Dani, thank you for your generous spirit, time, energy, for being you to the fullest every day on that pursuit. Where can your new fans find, follow, and support you?
Tom, thank you so much for having me. You're one of my favorite shows to be on. I love your questions. You're such a gracious, lovely host. Everyone can find me at danikatz.com. From there, they can find their way to my books, my courses, my webinars. If they want to work with me as a coach, as a consultant, they can find their way to my Instagram, my Odyssey channel, my podcast, all the things, danikatz.com.
It really has been a pleasure and a privilege, and I look forward to our next occasion to do it again.
Me too.
And thank you for filling my cup. This has really been a highlight to see you again.
The feeling is very mutual, Tom. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Dani.
Okay.